was able to get the Children's Advocacy Center open here in Will County. That law went into effect in 1988, and when I got in, I pledged to get a center open here. The law only required that you have a board, a child advocacy board, to sit around and look at each other in a room. We decided we needed a facility, and I started prosecuting in 1982, and I was well aware of the fact that sexual predators were getting away on a regular basis, because what was happening is, a rookie police officer gets called 3 in the morning to go to a house, and there's an allegation of sexual abuse. Well, he sits down at the kitchen table and tries to interview the child. The abuser could be in the house. You think he got a truthful statement? Not in a million years. And then the child might go to the hospital and be examined, make a statement to the doctor, make a statement to the nurse. Then the DCFS worker would come in, another statement. By the time all those statements got to my office, they were all different. It's a child. Every time you interview a child with a different style of examination, with different questions, suggestive, non-suggestive, the statements are going to be different. And that's death in a courtroom. We all understand that when you go to trial in a criminal case, you have due process rights, you have to cross-examine people, and no jury in the world with 4 different versions, they might feel sorry for the child, but they're not going to convict. And the Child Advocacy Center, after it was open for a year, one of the Will County detectives came up to me with a big smile on his face. He's a big Irish guy. He says, "Jim, this place is a godsend." And I understood what he was saying, because he was a great detective, but the last thing he wanted to do was try to interview a child about sexual abuse. He's not trained to do it. And I don't know how many of you have had a chance to see our center, but when we first started out, we had the two-way mirror, where we had an assistant state's attorney, a police officer, and a DCFS worker watching the interview, and two-way radio communication with the trained interviewer. And of course, the interviewer can't ask any suggestive questions like, "When did he touch you there?" The moment you do that, it's over, it's done. And we videotape all of our interviews now, and the plea rate is exceedingly high. It's not a case most defense attorneys want to take into a courtroom. We had one guy go to trial, and we had to call the doctor from Edward Hospital about the tearing in the private areas. That jury came back in about 30 seconds. So we normally don't have to do that, go to that extent, but when they push the envelope, we are prepared to do that. As things moved along, I started looking at how we were hanging felony convictions on young kids for recreational drug use. And I thought, this is really counterproductive. And I've always used the figure, every dollar you spend on remedial costs, or on prevention, you save $10 on remedial costs. And after listening to these numbers that have been put up here today, it's a lot higher than that. And then that $40 billion that Foster's talking about, holy mackerel, every year we're losing $40 billion. We need to march on Washington. But anyway, the drug court has been flourishing, and we even got a grant halfway, a few years back, because our performance was so high that they chose us as a test site. And we just had a graduation yesterday with 25 graduates, which is the highest we've ever had. And tragically, we've seen a change from 20% heroin and 80% cocaine. That's now flipped to 80% heroin and 20% cocaine. And we've got to absolutely have an epidemic with heroin. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before. And if it wasn't for the drug court, every graduation, graduates would come up to myself and the staff and say, "If it wasn't for this drug court, I would be dead." And there was one young man, Dick Durbin, was in for a little round table, and I met one of the drug court participants, and he said, he was in jail for 2 months before he just started to finally realize and remember who he was. He was in a haze for 2 months, and we normally have a 6 months detention to dry the individual out. The tragic thing there is our drug court works amazingly well. We have a 90% success rate preventing relapses on drugs. That's phenomenal. But in order for me to help you, I have to arrest you and lock you up for 6 months. Now, the private sector can't do that. We've got to figure out a way with this drug heroin to get something close to what we do in our drug court, because it works. It really works. And I'm working on some legislation right now. Natalie Manley, she's been screaming at me to give her the language. We'll get it to her on Monday. But we've got to recategorize heroin. It's a poison as much as it is a drug. And so it can't be lumped in with the other controlled substances. It's got to have its own category. And we've got to make the penalties for dealers higher. They're dealing in poison. They're killing our kids. And when I hear Mexico pushing back on us, you know where all the heroin comes from? Mexico. So we've got to make that an issue in our settlements, whatever we're going to do. But all of this poison is coming from that country. And what we should be saying is, we need your help to stop it. We need to partner up and make sure you're on board with us to stop that flow. In Will County, we do a phenomenal job as far as taking the dealers out. As soon as they show up, they're gone. But we've all heard of the heroin highway. There's an unlimited supply of heroin in Chicago. And we have an annual conference here, and one of the social workers came up to me, and I wish I would have taken her up on this. She said, you know, I'm from Chicago, and if you'd like to get in the car with me, I can take you up to 4 gas stations, and we can buy as much heroin as we want, and no one will stop us. That's pretty frightening. And we can see from the fatal overdoses we had this year, the highest we'd ever had before was 53, and we're at 76 right now, and there may be still a few that are going to be confirmed in the next few weeks. That's intolerable. I've just purchased a drug dog for Shanahan and for Wilmington, and with an eye not to lock up kids, but getting the heroin away from the kids. So I could envision running the dog through the school, 6 lockers with heroin. We get the heroin out, we bring the kids in, turn them over to human services for treatment, saving their lives. The other thing is, when we're talking, there's a move afoot in law enforcement to allow kids to come into a police station and turn over their heroin, not get arrested, and be referred to treatment. The problem is, that's running afoul of the legal system. Prosecutors got to be involved. There's something somewhere, and you don't want heroin turned over to anybody when there's no criminal case. Who's in charge of the heroin? Where is it going to go? It's not going into evidence. So now we're creating a whole other problem. But that's why I want to write this legislation that will create procedures for law enforcement on how to handle the heroin in those situations, so that the prosecutors will be on board and not trying to indict on those types of situations. This is the kind of progressive thinking that it's been long overdue. But I think we're going to be hitting the road again here in Will County. We've got the HERO organization, the health department, the HELPS organization. There's no other county that has two agencies like that working together on this problem. And hopefully we can get as many parents out, as many kids out, and let them know just how dangerous this drug is. And if you use it one time, I read a statistic, and there's professionals here, maybe I'm wrong, but as many as 65% of the population, you're addicted on the first use. And then you're not yourself anymore. I always like to think there's nobody that could convince me to do something wrong. It's not me, but from what I've heard, if I took heroin, I wouldn't be me. And, that's, that Captain America syndrome would be overcome. And, you have